Welcome. This is going to be our first discussion really regarding the digestive system. I know that you guys read previously a little bit about the digestive system and chemical digestion and mechanical digestion, how the two are related. You learned a little bit about enzymes, namely amylase, lipase, and pepsins. All of them are associated with chemical digestion, but they break down the different macromolecules within the foods that we consume. So today we're going to start looking a little bit more at the alimentary canal, or organs that food passes through as it goes through our body, as well as the individual organs within the digestive system and their anatomy and their physiology as well. You have this image right in the forefront on the first page of the notes that you were provided. Notice that you do have to fill some of these terms in, so you may want to pause this, take a moment, and fill it in, and then press play. Okay, so some of the words that you bubbled in on here, mouth, tongue, esophagus. But I want to go down here to the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. I just want to make sure that it's clear that these three things are all part of the small intestine. So if you did not fill in small intestine up here, make sure that you do on your paper. And likewise over on this side, all of these components are part of the large intestine. So do make sure that you have large intestine penciled in on yours as well. So what we see here is the anatomy of the digestive system. We have the pathway of food, which is known as the alimentary canal. Begins with the oral cavity, the mouth and tongue and teeth, goes down the esophagus into the stomach, where it would continue to be broken down, into the small intestine, all 22 feet of it, then into the large intestine, and then out of the body. So the alimentary canal is a total of 9 meters in length, which is about 27 feet. Once again, the alimentary canal only consists of things that the food actually passes through. And that would begin with the mouth, then the esophagus and stomach. Then it goes into the small intestine, namely the duodenum. The pancreas is not part of the alimentary canal. Although it is part of the digestive system, food does not actually go through the pancreas, so that is not part of the alimentary canal. We can see that the small intestines are quite long, and then the large intestine is considerably shorter relative to the small intestine. So the functions of the digestive system. We spoke of some of these a little while ago with our introductory reading. Mechanical digestion and chemical digestion, which kind of work hand in hand. Mechanical digestion occurs in the mouth. It's where we take things like this sandwich and we break it into smaller pieces using our teeth. Chemical digestion would occur beginning in the stomach, actually up in the mouth with amylase, and that is where enzymes are used to break down really small molecules. So we're using a mechanical first, and that's taking something that's really large and breaking it into something that's smaller. And then chemical is taking these smaller pieces and then breaking them down into something that's so small it can fit into our bloodstream. Also along with that goes an absorption of nutrients. This would occur in our small intestine, where we're removing these particles that we broke down, putting them into the blood, sending them through the body, and then absorbing them into the individual cells as needed. So we've been talking about the alimentary canal. Let's look at the typical characteristic of the canal, which most items will have these features. But realistically, I just kind of want you to think about this in terms of the small intestine. So there's different layers to the alimentary canal. These layers are known as the mucosa, which is right here. It's the inner layer. Then there's the submucosa right here, which surrounds the mucosa. And then there's a muscular layer right here. The muscular layer surrounds the submucosa. And then we have the serosa, which is the surface layer right up here. Now on your end, you're going to have to label some of these, so make sure that you get all of these parts labeled. And then underneath it, there's a few words that you're going to need to explain. So we're going to start explaining those now. The mucosa is the first one on your paper, so we'll start there. The mucosa is the innermost layer. Food comes into direct contact with the mucosa. Therefore, it makes sense that the mucosa's job is to absorb things. So things will be absorbed through the mucosa where they will get into the bloodstream. Then they can travel through the body. Next on your list is the submucosa. The submucosa contains blood vessels and glands. So we can see some significant benefits to the blood vessels being so close to the mucosa because the absorption of the nutrients needs to get into these blood vessels so they can be circulated through the body. We can also see that the submucosa contains nerves, which would be used to help move food through the alimentary canal in one way. These nerves would also come into contact with the muscular layer for the muscular contractions. So speaking of which, the muscular layer, its job is to contract and push food through the alimentary canal. And this happens through a process known as peristalsis. That is spelled Peristalsis. I'll discuss peristalsis a little bit further with you guys one-on-one here, but just to get an idea of what peristalsis is, picture having a straw with some water, and you need to get that water to go vertical through the straw in one motion. And you cannot suck the water, but you have to move your fingers in a motion that will get the water out through the straw. What would that look like? Well, that's kind of how peristalsis works. I'll demonstrate that one in class. And then the last layer would be the serosa. The serosa is a visceral peritoneum, so it's a layer or a skin on the visceral organ of the alimentary canal. Recall, visceral organs are any organ within our body that can move or change shape, and our intestines definitely can move and change shape. So the visceral peritoneum's job is to produce a serous fluid, which would allow for the intestines to move freely without friction. So it does function to prevent friction as our body changes shape and form. Taking a closer look inside the small intestine, we can see a couple things here. We can see that the wall is actually ridged with these bumps. Now this would be, going back a slide, right here. And those villi, those bumps on the slide I'm going to go back to, go all the way around the circumference of this canal. So that canal, from beginning to end, has these villi, these bumps. And on the villi, taking a closer look, there's even smaller bumps called the microvilli. The purpose of both the villi and microvilli is to increase the surface area within the small intestine specifically. So let's liken this to folding up a paper, kind of like if you were making an accordion. You can have a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and it's laid out flat, takes up a good amount of space. But you can also fold that paper in half many, many times and cram it into a very narrow space. That's kind of what these do. They increase the surface area. So why would we want our small intestine to have increased surface area? Well, that's where the absorption of nutrients happens, and the nutrients are very, very small, and this maximizes our potential for our ability to absorb those nutrients, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats, and the water, all in the foods that we eat. So these help absorb by increasing the surface area of our small intestine. So let's now talk about movements of the tube in terms of moving food through the alimentary canal. And there's two types. There's mixing movements, and then there's propelling movements. The mixing movements occur when we are mixing food with digestive juices. This tends to happen in the stomach, where we're taking some stomach acids, and then we're mixing them with the foods. That begins the chemical digestion process. And then once we get into the small intestine, I guess this also occurs in the esophagus as well, the propelling movements would specifically be referencing that peristalsis that I mentioned a few slides back. This is what actually pushes food through the alimentary canal. which I should mention is caused by that muscular layer that we looked at a few slides back, which is smooth muscle. So that is muscle that we have no control over. It's involuntary. This just happens and it moves the food through our body. Thankfully, we don't have to think about doing that. So let's start looking at the organs contained within the digestive system, beginning with the mouth. As you can well imagine, this is the first step in the digestive system because that's where we put food. We chew it. And as we're chewing food, we're mixing the food with saliva. Contained within saliva is one of those enzymes we looked at previously, specifically amylase, which breaks down carbohydrates. So saliva is kind of amylase mixed in with water, and this starts the breakdown of carbohydrates, making those kind of almost already dissolved by the time they even get to the stomach. As we chew our food and mix it with saliva, you know that mushy ball of food that you get that you swallow? That is called a bolus. So a bolus is a chewed up wad of food that you swallow. Still within the mouth, we have the tongue, another organ. And on this tongue, we can see, pretty good on this picture, we can see a bunch of bumps. Those bumps are called papillae. They have two functions. First off, they provide friction, which allows us to move food. But some of these papillae also serve as taste buds, so they double up in function. Some will not only help move food, but some also serve as those taste buds. We can see that there's different types of papillae in our tongue, and they all have different shapes, like the circumvallate. They're in the back of the tongue, a little bit larger. We have the fungiform kind of spread out on the top level of the tongue, the filiform in the middle, and then the foliate on the sides, which kind of look like gills on fish. So locating some of those papillae that contain the taste buds, we can see that there's 5 basic flavors that we can detect: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Umami is also savory. And then down here we can see their locations: sweet on the tip of the tongue, salty on the tip and sides of the front, sour deeper on the tongue and on the sides, bitter back of the tongue, and umami is kind of spaced out all over. I'm going to conclude this video by showing a couple YouTube videos that kind of go into a little bit deeper depth regarding the taste buds, so they're pretty quick and short.
So how does taste work? Well, let's start by looking at the tongue. On the surface of the tongue are wart-like bumps that are called papillae. There are 4 types of papillae: fungiform, circumvallate, foliate, and filiform. Filiform papillae are the most numerous papillae, but they do not contain any taste buds. Taste buds are located in the walls and grooves of these papillae, and most adults have between 2,000 and 4,000 buds in total. They consist mainly of a taste pore, sensory cells, taste hairs, and nerve fibers. So a flavor enters the taste pore. The sensory cells analyze the flavor and send the information to nerve fibers. The nerve fibers then send the data to the brain, and voila, we know the flavor that we're tasting. There are 5 main flavors: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and savory. All of these flavors can be sensed by all parts of the tongue. However, the sides of the tongue are more sensitive than the middle, and the back of the tongue is especially sensitive to bitter taste. It's believed that this is a protection mechanism against poisonous and spoiled foods before they're swallowed. And that be the basics on taste.
And then our second video regarding taste. This guy is a professional taste tester. Let's check him out.
So in tasting, what we do is take a small amount right off the top. It doesn't take much. That's the warmest part right here. I'm going to invert the spoon. Cover all 9,000 taste bud. Aerate it. Warm it up. Driving up that top note, that cream, pure vanilla, sweeteners. That's a 10.
So now you know how to appropriately eat and taste your food. We'll wrap up the notes that you have on the second video.